Hello everyone, it's David again. I'm on Babylon 5, Season 1, Episode 20. And as I have mentioned in the previous episode, my numbering system is now going to start differing from what Warner Brothers has marked down. So if you are trying to follow directly off of Warner Brothers, there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect starting actually about 2 episodes ago. So this episode is called The Quality of Mercy. We start off with the regent to the emperor talking to Londo. And Londo makes an interesting gesture, and we'll learn a little bit more, but he said, touch this to the lower part of his body. And we learn that later that is in reference to his private parts, basically, the Centauri sex organs. I do want to talk a little bit, before I go into too much more detail, I am going to be talking about things like mass murder and the death penalty. So if those kind of things gross you out, or just, you don't want to talk about or hear about things like that at this point in time, please feel free to go ahead and skip the rest of this episode. But on back to Babylon 5 universe. We see Londo coming out, and he starts to talk with Lennier. And he talks about Lennier, now that Delen's off the station, you don't have much to do. What are you doing to occupy your time? Well, I'm reading. Well, what about, all the other alien species you see on board Babylon 5? How are you interacting with them? Well, I read a lot about the different cultures, and reading is no substitute for experience. Even though it's a great imposition on me starting tomorrow, I'm going to take a couple of days and train you on some of the more colorful areas of Babylon 5. And he's kind of like, well, I don't know, but of course he, being an aide, certainly doesn't want to offend the ambassador to the Great Centauri Republic and cause a minor diplomatic kerfuffle, so why not? We switch on before the Ombuds, the same one that was almost mind-wiped by Ambassador Kosh in a previous episode. He has a serial murderer. Is convicted, I believe, of 3 murders, and he says that he's going to pass sentencing, or finds him guilty, and says he's going to pass sentencing at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We got to cue the entrance now. Zip on over. Dr. Franklin is down below, and he is being confronted by Ivanova about charging people for med lab services. Now, I can tell you this is almost a uniquely American experience among industrialized countries, certainly, but even some non-industrialized countries. The United States is still the only one that does not insure or have universal health care coverage. Now, having been a registered nurse for 18.5 years and used to dealing with union contracts, I cannot tell you how many times I've had patients either miss medications, miss doctor's appointments, miss follow-up tests, miss important diagnoses because they just simply couldn't afford it. I am looking at least conservatively $15,000 that I need to fix my mouth. I've got dental cavities. I take, it's called a calcium channel blocker for my blood pressure, but as the name implies, it also blocks the reuptake of calcium into my teeth, and so my teeth and my jaw bones start to get weak. And so my teeth are, now that I'm 49, are starting to feel the ravages, and I need at least $15,000 worth of dental repair. I've got an abscess that's waiting to explode up there, but I can't get them taken a look at because I can't afford that kind of money. I don't know of many people, except in the top 5%, who can that kind of money. And I have health insurance, people. For the Americans who will understand this, I have gold level Obamacare. My healthcare premiums went from $803 a month down to $72 a month under the more recent administration, but at the same time, my out-of-pocket maximum for dental work is $1,500 per year. Well, one deep cleaning, that was $1,350. Well, there just went my out-of-pocket maximum till December 31st, and then it rolls over January 1st. And I'm just one of millions of people that are like that in the United States of America. But here we are, 250 years later, we still don't seem to have figured out the problem. Or at least in the Babylon 5 universe. Mind you, every other country has figured it out, but just seems like not Babylon 5. But anyway, Ivanova, is kind of saying, look, if you're going to do it, that's fine, but at least inform me so that, if my head's on the chopping block, I'd like to at least get, some of the glory that goes with it. So she starts washing up her hands, and she's going to go help. Well, Dr. Franklin says, hey, wait a minute here. All of a sudden, my patient count is down. I wonder what's going on. And that leads on to a change of scenes. Michael Garibaldi wants death for the murderer. And he makes a point to the ombudsman that he's got murdered before, and the ombudsman said, look, unless you've got evidence that you can prove it, I can only charge him with what I have before me. And evidently that's not enough for the death penalty, or they've just gotten rid of it. But according to what, there's three options according to the ombudsman. Prison on Earth, and Earth doesn't want the cost of transporting him and the upkeep to deal with him. Keep him on Babylon 5, incarcerated for life, but like Garibaldi says, there's not enough prison space on Babylon 5, much less keeping somebody in solitary for the rest of their life, or what is called the death of personality. And what the death of personality is you are psychiatrically scanned to see what's up in your head, you are medically brain wiped, and then you're programmed with a new personality, one that is designed to, do community service, and you're supposedly taken to where your victim's family can't find you, and you're set, to work cleaning streets or whatever. Now, we'll also, a little bit later on, in the B5 universe, we will touch on the subject of what happens when that system breaks down. But we jump on back. Dr. Franklin finds out about this lady named Dr. Rosen. And she comes in to Dr. Rosen on this alien machine. And Dr. Franklin says, I wonder what's going on, because these people he ran tests on, and they're actually getting better, demonstrably better. So she's not some quack like he initially suspects. But he comes upon Dr. Rosen on this alien machine that she bought off a trader a year earlier. What happened was Dr. Rosen was stripped of her medical privileges after she wanted to do so much, but she ended up taking stims, drugs, alcohol. I can sympathize with that one. I've been there myself. But what she doesn't realize, and committed a medical error and was forced out of the medical profession in disgrace. So she comes along about a year prior to this incident, or after this incident, I should say, she comes upon this alien machine. And from what she can tell, it was a form, and she says, I believe, of corporal punishment. I believe it should be capital punishment. Because capital punishment is basically the death penalty. Corporal punishment is like when you got hit in school, if your teacher was allowed to spank you, They were starting to fade that out in the late 70s and 80s when I was in school. But so corporal has to do with the body, like a corporeal existence. Anyway, the daughter of Dr. Rosen follows on, but doesn't realize that it is actually physically draining her life. That Dr. Franklin discovers when he scans Dr. Rosen during one of her sessions. Let's see here. Let's see here. Jumping on over to Lennier, and he ends up going out with Londo to the bar. Well, Londo ordered him an alcoholic beverage, and right before Lennier takes a sip, he says, my people go into a homicidal rage if we ingest even tiny amounts of alcohol. And Londo says, that's for me. And, of course, to start it off, as they go into this, it's a strip bar. As they go into this bar, Londo conveniently forgets his credit chit back at his quarters and borrows Lennier's credit chit. So it also makes you wonder if that wasn't his MO all the time, he ran out of money and was trying to get a hold of somebody else's funds. But anyways, Lennier in one of the scenarios ends up boring Londo to death, until Londo overhears Lennier saying that he became a adept novitiate or something of math and probability, as in statistics, as in the odds of particular patterns repeating themselves. Well, sure. So Londo says, Lennier, I want to teach you something humans call poker. Oh boy, here we go. As Talia goes to scan the murderer guy, the serial murderer, right before his mind wipe, she finds out and sees that he has killed lots of people over many different worlds. Lots and lots of people. He wants to add to his choir to sing him to heaven when he dies. And that's his mental thing, or that's his MO when he murders people. Now, do you support something like this? It'd be easy to see. Do you support this in lieu of the death penalty? Or are you like an average American? I kind of go back and forth between. Sometimes I think the death penalty is a good idea, especially when it's, young people or just heinous death. And then I go, but what happens if they're not guilty and we find out through DNA testing or something like that? Then we've killed somebody, and you can't just bring them back to life and say, oh, sorry. So I kind of go back and forth between that. So it would be interesting to find out what are the maximum penalties in your country. For instance, I got into a heated discussion with a Norwegian friend of mine that Anders Behring Breivik was his name, and he's the guy that killed, I believe it was 82 people in Oslo and then on the island of Utoya. And his maximum penalty that he can get is 20 years. And she goes, yes, but David, then he's going to be psychiatrically evaluated, and then he will have to go back to court, and then they will sentence him to 20 years again. And so it's not like every 20 years he's going to be pardoned. No, he's going to be resentenced to for all the deaths. Basically, he's never going to leave a prison, is what she was trying to explain to me. So, interesting. Let's see here. Lennier starts off doing some pretty, major no-nos in gambling, and that is talking across the table. For instance, he says, do you know the odds of having this particular hand is 5,000 to 1 against? Well, of course, with those kind of odds, I'm going to throw in the cards like everyone else does. And Londo is like, dude, really? So have If any of you it's been a long time, but in my family, we started off learning how to play pinochle at a very young age, and always drilled into our head, no talking across the table. So if any of you had any sort of experiences with that, I'd also be interested to know. Let's see here. But you also notice, too, that Lennier appears to be winning a lot. His pile of chips is bigger than everybody else's. Well, if you're good at mathematics and probability and you have a very good memory, like Lennier appears to have trained his memory, you can do pretty good at those kinds of games. But, of course, anybody who's been to Vegas or Reno or any of those gambling spots knows, and almost always, the house wins the game. But as we go on, first we go to another scene where Dr. Franklin finds out that this alien machine of Dr. Rosen's was actually used as a mean of, it should have been capital punishment. And we find out that Dr. Rosen has 2 to 3 years to live due to a terminal illness called Lake's syndrome, which I don't know. I haven't been able to find anything called Lake's syndrome, so it must be a JMS invention. So anyways, and Dr. Franklin, as he's walking on out, ends up hitting on Dolores' daughter, asking her out to dinner. Awkward. We zip on back to Talia Winters. After she scanned this murderer guy, she goes up to Garibaldi and says, you know, when you told me you bet good money that he's murdered before, she says, you would not have lost that bet. And every once in a while you'll hear phrases or memes like, you would not have lost that bet. And some of them are referring back to this one. We come in next to Londo, is still playing poker with Lennier, and Londo goes and appears to be uncomfortable, and all of a sudden you see something kind of pop out, and then all of a sudden a little thing with like graspers on the end grabs a card, and all of a sudden it goes back down, and all of a sudden Londo, you see, has a new card. So somehow Londo has taken a card from across the table and put it into his hand. So something on Londo's body is able to reach out quite a distance from him, has some sort of grabbing technique, and pulls. Now, this is going to lead up to, in my opinion, one of the funniest scenes ever in Babylon 5 history. Watch this episode at least a good 3-4 times before you get all of it, but holy cow, does it turn quite hilarious quite quickly. As this is going on, all of a sudden the murderer escapes after being wounded. He is going to go on and be wiped. He manages to bum rush the security team, and he escapes. So, as Londo goes down and under, and another hand around, all of a sudden one of the guys at the table he's got this big pitcher of ice water, pours himself some of it, and boom! And as happenstance would have it, wouldn't you know it, but it lands on this part of Londo's body, this little grabber thing. Well, all of a sudden he starts shaking and, brrr, is it cold in here or is it just me? And everybody's like, nope, it's fine here. And all of a sudden, as the guy that had just slammed the pitcher down on Londo's whatever that was, all of a sudden we lifts it up. All of a sudden this hook thing snaps back under, and Londo's just like, and all of a sudden, hey, you're cheating. And all of a sudden, Lennier and Londo get involved in a very nasty bar brawl. And it will become more hilarious as you find out what exactly this little grabber thing of Londo's was. The murderer that has escaped has now found Dr. Rosen, and he's holding her daughter hostage, you know. And his PPG wound that he got in his escape attempt, he is forcing Dr. Rosen to heal it, or he'll blow his daughter's brains out. Well, Dr. Franklin guessed what may or may not have been coming down, but all of a sudden he tries to walk in, distracts the guy. The Dr. Rosen ends up, before the murderer can react, she hits full power on this alien machine, and literally what it does is it sucks all the life force from the murderer and gives it to Dr. Rosen. So even though she had Lake syndrome and maybe 2 or 3 years to live, all of a sudden now she's fully on, and the murderer is dead on the floor. So we zip on over. Dr. Rosen is exonerated, but she must leave the machine with Dr. Franklin. So this machine that, now if you think about it, on the one hand, you know, what better way of serving justice than to take people who have been convicted of murder and things like that and using their life energy for a good purpose. But then again, what happens when all the murderers on death row are all used up, and all of a sudden you've got this machine? Now all of a sudden, what are you going to go now through the general prison population? Are you going to, well, if you're pulled over for a speeding ticket, now all of a sudden you're up next? Because, or what happens if some rich guy is dying and he wants to live forever at the age of 98? So he keeps paying people obscene amounts of money to take their life energy so he can go on for a few more days. I mean, if you think about it, on the one hand it sounds great, but on the other hand it can have really terrible, you know, I can see where this could turn into a really dark, the use of this machine could turn really dark and really ugly really quickly. Now, let me know down below what you guys think. Should murderers be forced to pay with it by giving their life energy up? Would be interesting to know. Londo and Lennier are being questioned by Commander Sinclair about the barroom fight. Now, you see Londo and Lennier both busted up. Lennier ends up lying to save face. Now, this is one of the few times you will see a Minbari lying. Minbari consider it a matter of honor to help another person save face by lying. It's one of the few episodes, and that will become important later. And Lennier says, by the way, a part of you seemed to reach out from under the table and grab, and what was that exactly? And he whispers something into Lennier's ear, and he's like, what? And he said, well, see, our goddess of passion. And you see this goddess with these big outstretched. He goes, what did you think these big things were? Decorations? And he goes, I'm just going to keep a vow of silence about this whole episode. Now, for those of you who don't get it or didn't understand it, from basically, it was Londo's sex organ. As we will find out later, Centauri have 6 sex organs, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side, and as the woman, I guess, is laying on top of them or in passion, he inserts them into receptacles on her back, and now you know how Centauris make baby Centauris. Anyways, lots to comment and or talk about, and anyways, as always, comment, like, subscribe, and share. Hope you all have a good rest of your day.